And now the New Patriotic Party is carrying out further consultations on selecting the ideal time to hold the presidential and parliamentary primaries. Two previous attempts to set that date, modalities and also the venue for the internal elections failed to yield results. All meetings amongst others had the national executives and also the President of the Republic together with his vice and other leading figures of the party present who could not compromise on the proposed dates for the exercise. Whereas some are calling for early Congress, others are also of the view that a delayed one will avoid what is being termed as a faulty leadership structure within the governing party. Let's speak now to Richard Ahiangba, he's Director of Communications for the New Patriotic Party. Thank you, Richard, for your time here on The Pulse. So, last week it didn't go down well. Of course, there are many who are watching to see what's likely to happen this week. What's happening and what could be that update that you could give to the public on the selection of a date for the presidential and parliamentary primaries for the NPP?
Well, thank you very much. I think that immediately after National Council meeting, before the National Executive Committee meeting and Select Committee meeting, I think the General Secretary made a statement in respect of what the outcome was, in particular about the date for the internal primaries, the presidential and the parliamentary. It wasn't in the nature as has been reported. It wasn't any tense conversation where people were going back and forth. It was just a discussion to see what is ideal. And I should say that the conversation actually started with steering committee on Wednesday, and the position of steering committee was proposed, and it was accepted that there was a need for further consultation to settle on a date that will be amicable for all stakeholders involved. So I think that the party is allowing the processes to work, and I think that in a good time now, a date to be settled on for us to do the internal primaries.
When you say you're allowing the processes to work, what's that?
There's a committee that was charged with to figure out on a date that everybody will agree with. That committee's work is not done, and they've been allowed to continue to engage further to arrive at a date that will be practical for all and acceptable. And I think that even in having this conversation, there's history to guide us in case anybody is anxious about whether or not we have time to conduct these elections. History being a guide under President Kufuor, we had the elections in December of 2007, a year before the presidential and parliamentary elections. So we have that guide. And in 2014, for the 2016 election, we had the primaries in 2014, and for 2012, we had it in 2010. So there is ample guide for us to rest assured that we are within time to do this election.
And that's where the great divide, if you want to call it as such, is emerging within the NPP, with many feeling that an early Congress will help your fortunes in terms of the next elections, which is in 2024.
Well, it's not a question. I mean, it's not a question of what will help or not. There's no crystal ball to look into. The key thing is that if the party is mobilized and there is peace and we're all on the same page, which is what dialogue and consensus would bring, I think that the party is resolute. The NPP is a formidable party. If you look at the history of the 2007 election, as I said, we got behind. Even then, you have several candidates, about 17 candidates. At the end of that interesting primaries, were able to come together, won the first round, but unfortunately did not win the second round. So it tells you that the party itself, in terms of mobilization or organizing, there isn't too much to worry about. We just have to ensure that we're giving a fair chance for democracy to work. And I think that that's really the key that we need to look at.
But per the constitution of the NPP, whose ultimate call will this be? I mean, to choose or decide the dates for the election?
Come again.
Per the constitution of the New Patriotic Party, whose ultimate call would this be to determine the date, venue, and modalities for the
Well, it's National Council. National Council ultimately will have to decide on the matter, but then it will go through the process, starting obviously from steering committee, and the issue will be addressed at National Executive Committee, and ultimately National Council will make that decision. But then, like I said, the process will begin, and it has begun. The committee, National Council actually put that committee in place that is led by our former chairman, Mark Menu. That committee is still working. The only thing which came to light the last time is to try and engender more consensus so we can arrive at a date. And I just told you two streams of possibilities as far as our experience is concerned. We've done it a year before. We've done it 2 years into an election from an opposition.
I get that, but I'm asking the question. I'm just asking the question to demonstrate that indeed at your last meeting, there was no consensus. There are some reports out there even indicating that the president left unhappy after the engagement.
That is absolutely not true. And I'm not sure how these reports are getting out. I was in the room, like I'll tell you, from steering committee, which happened on Wednesday night, Thursday, both National Council and the National Executive Committee. There wasn't any tension in the room. There were fair conversations that were had. In fact, at National Executive Committee, it was the proposal of steering committee to allow for further consultation that was brought up, and it was accepted. And then we moved on from there. So President sat in the meeting, steering committee the night before, the two meetings on the day, National Executive Committee and National Council. We finished the meeting. The president made his statement and closed the meeting. So I don't see where anybody would say the president left unhappy. Absolutely not true.
I'm interested in his statement just to prove the point that he wasn't unhappy. What was the position or perhaps the posture of the president on this? Early Congress or a delayed one?
Well, there isn't any crystallized position on this matter. The situation we have presently is consultation that a committee seized with the power to help the party decide a date is working on it. I don't think that any one person's position is material, because it is going to factor into that decision multiple views, and ultimately those views would be, synthesized, and an ideal date will form for the party to move forward.
Richard, you feel it will not be fair to share the position of the president on this? At least it may serve as a guide.
I don't think that is material. We're looking for a party position, and that party position has not formed yet. So when you begin to say this or that, in any case, when listening to the discussion, nobody is entrenched in their position. The thing is that let's have consultation. Let's be guided by history. Let's pick the ideal date that everybody will agree with. Okay? In fact, since you are asking to see the president's mind, the word, so let's engage so we can have consensus was the president's particular word. He used the word consensus. So you can understand that throughout the process, there is that feeling that we should have a broad-based consultation to ensure that any position will be acceptable to all.
Okay, very briefly as we wrap up, what's your word to the grassroots of the party who are feeding into this report? And of course, it's gone round on many social media platforms. I'm sure that you're even getting some of them yourself about how the selection of the date for the presidential and parliamentary primaries is beginning to degenerate and crack the ranks of the NPP. What would be your message to, the grassroots of the party who are anxious and worried about it?
There's a position in the media that is contrary to the position in the party that I experience. Certainly, there are people who want us to do it early or later, but I'm saying that it's immaterial, really, if you are trying to allow democracy to work. Then, because what I feel cannot be the sum total of what the population feel in the party. So I think that everybody's feeling is their feeling, but what is really going to carry the day would be the consensus that we can build for the party through the committee to realize everybody's view coming together and forming a day for us out of that. I think that the collective wisdom is really what we should be striving for, and I think that we'll get that. And even within time, like I've said, there's history that guides us that we are within time to be able to consider these matters and make a decision that will be in the best interest of the party.
But you're setting we'll get the date by the end of this month, at least.
By all means, the NPP is determined to win the 2024 election. We need a candidate to do that. So certainly we'll come up with a date that will lead us to select our flag bearer and then be able to contest and win the 2024 elections.
Grateful. Richard Ahyang, Vice Director of Communications for the New Patriotic Front.